to begin with, much like we, I think, did last time, my memory is spotty for reasons that we can't go into. I sent you an email. I sent you two this morning. If you pull one of them up, one is a backup as always, so try one. If it doesn't work, try the other one. What we're looking at today, I have it up on the board as well. Make it a little bigger. Ooh. That probably would fit. Like that. Yeah. Okay. So what we're looking at, this is an introduction from the homework you guys just turned in. Just like we said last time, standard preamble. This is a classmate's work. We need to be respectful. You guys did, I think, a pretty good job of that last time. Let's just keep that nice train rolling, sort of thing. Okay. Will you get the light source actually, since you're back there? All right. What I'm interested in today, we spent last time talking about body paragraphs. Really, we've spent most of our classes up to now talking about body paragraphs. And again, the reason for that is that's most of your paper. Also, I would contend you can't really write an introduction without some kind of body paragraphs under your belt. You're introducing us to your ideas, but you don't really know what those are until you write them down. So ideally, you're somewhere on that path now, which is to say, that's why I say the introduction for later in the process. We don't have this student's body paragraphs, and that's okay given what we're going to do today. All I want you to do, there's two steps I want you to undertake. Number one, and we're going to review this before we jump into it, but number one, when you read over this, either on the board or in your lap or whatever, whatever you got in front of you, I want you to do your best to identify the parts of an introduction. There are 4 of them, like we talked about last time. And again, we'll review that here in a second. Identify the parts to the best of your ability. And then question number 2, how do we do? According to your understanding, at least, of what I'm asking you to do in this paper, in these introductions, do we do what we need to do in each one of these 4 parts? Another way to take that question is, if you feel like we don't, well, where do you see that happening? Do we have missed opportunities? Do we need more information? Do we need to expand? Anything like this, right? We're kind of figure that out today. All right. So the 4 parts. You guys know some of these. You knew some of these before we ever met. How do you start an introduction? First sentence. Put that down. It can be the hook. It's optional. You don't have to have it, but again, you guys love them, so you want to hook the reader. You want to interest the reader in some form or fashion. Okay? What comes after that? Anybody recall?
Introduction to the story.
Good. You introduce the text. In this case, a poem, but it could be a story, it could be a movie, video game, album. You get it. Title and author. Okay, usually not in that order, actually. Sorry. In B.H. Fairchild's Little Boy, what comes after that? No, slow down. Before that. We need something else when we introduce the text. I know there's a truck behind me now. Title and author. What else do we need? In B.H. Fairchild's Little Boy, how would you end that sentence? You need to summarize the text, just a little bit. Just a little bit, not a lot. But again, you're introducing the text. So title, author, in B.H. Fairchild's Little Boy, we follow the titular little boy, SAT word of the day, titular, just means it ties into the title. Little boy, when he asks a question about atomic bombs, and the father is clearly troubled. Pretty good summary, I suppose. Now after that, we get the roadmap, and then the thesis. Okay, and that's important. Look, I appreciate that because number one, you gotta have a thesis. You need to do that. But give a shot at the roadmap as well. Remember, the way we talked about it last time, a roadmap is meant to do 2 things. Kind of walk me through some of the bigger ideas I'm going to encounter in the paper, and also set me up for the thesis. Your thesis statement might be 2-ish sentences, and it's going to supposedly pack in all the big ideas that you got in your paper into those 2-ish sentences. That's a lot in a very small space. So your roadmap is going to lay out how that stuff works in more detail, so that when I read those 2-ish sentences, it makes any sense. Okay? So hook, introduce the text, roadmap, then your thesis. which we'll talk about today, more in depth, but needs to be an argument. We'll leave it at that for now. All right, take a minute, read over this. Remember, identify the parts first. Do we have all four? What do you think? And then, how good a job are we? Are we accomplishing what we need to with each of those four parts? Take a minute, read over this. All I want to do, we're going to jump into the how good a job did we do? What do we need to, blah, blah, blah. To make it real simple at the start, I want to try to break this guy up into the four parts if we have them. So to begin with, do we have a hook, even though that is optional? Yeah. Where's it at? Yeah, as people get older, only about 20% of adults play sports that are 50 years or older. A little over, we would fix that, in post. Whether that is due to the blah, blah, blah. So yeah, that first sentence, that's our hook, right? Spectacular. Oh, I gotta find it up here now. All right. Cool. So that means hopefully that next sentence is what? Is it? Is it? Yeah. In the poem, Only Playing Basketball by B.H. Fairchild, title and author. The author does a thing. All right. Whereabouts does that end our introduction to the text, do you think? Is it just that sentence or does it go a little further? Sometimes it will. What do you guys think?
Does it go a little bit further?
I believe it does.
The next sentence.
So it's two sentences?
I think it's 3.
So it's here.
Yeah.
Why do you say so? I agree with you. I'm just curious why.
I mean, I feel like because then he's kind of giving the idea that the person's gonna write about. So then it's kind of the thesis.
I think I follow what you're saying. So another way to think about kind of what we're doing right here. What are these sentences accomplishing? Like what kind of information is this? Background information. It rhymes with mummery. Summary. It's a summary of the poem. It's probably a little long, but that's what it is. Okay. So introduce the text. Cool. That means the rest of this is our roadmap and our thesis. And again, I think it can actually help just to say, where's our thesis? If we pull that guy off, we're going to know what we have left, and that will hopefully be our roadmap, right? Where do you think the thesis starts?
The last sentence,
Why do you say that?
that's normally where the thesis would be.
Sure. It can be multiple sentences. So wait, I got cocky. That's the last sentence. Did you say it right there?
The last two sentences.
Ah. Why? Ooh, fuck my life. Hang on. Why'd you make that change?
Because the two sentences go hand in hand together.
You know what I'm gonna ask, right?
I don't know how to describe it.
Okay.
It just brain saying words.
Brain says words, is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes. Might it be because we do that? And that's one of those signposts that have been carved into your hearts? Yeah, I think so. All right. So again, things to say about all of these, but worst case scenario, we do have all the parts. We got a hook, we intro the text, we got a roadmap, needs to be longer, okay? And we got a thesis. Swell. What we're actually going to do now, just for a couple minutes, you'll humor me, I hope. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about writing. I will do this throughout the semester. This is supposedly a writing class, but I understand that what I'm about to launch into will put everyone to sleep. So I tell you this. It'll be short. It'll be real quick. When I do this, it's like one or two sort of mini lessons, I guess. We're going to do real fast. So as soon as you start tapping out, give me one of these, come back, and we'll probably be done right around that time. All right? Cool. What I want to talk to you about, other than instructional stuff, how to build an introduction, that's the main idea today. I want to talk to you about unnecessary language, redundant language, padding, things like this. It can happen for all kinds of reasons, okay? But I'm going to highlight 3 places in this introduction for you where it's pretty stark. And the first one is, we've broken it all up now, so I got to find it, sorry. Right there. Right here. In B.H. Fairchild's, that whole thing, Now look, you always know when you have unnecessary language, because if you go back and read that language, the question should always be, what are we accomplishing? Okay? What I mean is, all this accomplishes something. Tells us information we need, right? The authors, already I'm like, but we don't, so I could even include that, all right? But his underlying point of the poem is to discuss the aspects. We went all the way from Fairchild, it took us till aspects until we got to something concrete, okay? The reason this happens, and I may have mentioned this last time, I know I repeat myself and I apologize. The reason this happens is because when you're drafting, you're doing this, and you don't always know what you want to say, you know? Like I just paused in the conversation, my brain went, shut up for just a second, figure it out, now go, right? But when you're doing this, sometimes you just keep doing this, and your brain goes, I don't know either, and then you figure it out, okay? It took us until this long, it normally does, about that long. We want to talk about the aspects of life, like now all of a sudden we're rolling again, right? All that's good information. This other stuff gets in the way, because we're not saying anything. Watch what happens when I delete it. Usually you want to try to get to a verb. Discuss is good enough. In the poem, Old Men Playing Basketball, B.H. Fairchild discusses. Right? That's it. We've said exactly what we said before, but we did it with fewer words. That's a stronger language. You're getting to your point. And gives you more room to make your arguments, explain yourselves. I know some of you are like, but that was length. Like, but this is good stuff to cut. Okay? We got two more examples. The other one is actually somewhat similar. All right. Here, the author underlines the poem with these connections to make the reader understand even, man, oh man, all right. I'm going to include the verb just because it starts this phrase. Apparently the author underlines something about the poem. Maybe we could keep that, that's debatable. The rest of it, with these connections to make the reader understand that even we haven't said anything. Again, now this is similar to the previous one because it's built in roundabout the same way, but this actually stems from a different problem, and a lot of you will do this. The reader forces this sentence to get all crazy. We're building to that, so this phrase necessitates some of that language, and then it necessitates this verb and even more language. Like if you cut the reader out, it's going to get rid of a lot of issues. The reader, the audience, the viewer. The other reason you can cut that is because we know it's a poem that you read. We know that because you're writing about it. You see what I'm saying? It's not necessary. So cut it. The author. And we know it's a poem as well, so get rid of that. And as you get older, you still want the same things. That was our point the whole time. Again, right? The reader caused that one. Last but not least, there's one more. Oh, and this one is a related example. We have the audience down here. Apparently, B.H. Fairchild wants the audience to realize the importance of a man's concerns he has for his physical capabilities. All right. Let's get rid of actually, because we know it's by Fairchild as well, right? And we know it's a poem. And I just told you, get rid of audience. That says we can get rid of that verb because it's not tied to anything. Now look, the thesis is not a complete sentence at this point, or rather, you get it. So we'd have to fix that. But this is what we wanted to talk about. Again, I know it's by B.H. Fairchild. I know it's a poem. You told me that already. So just get to whatever you want to talk. All of you do this. I promise you. All of you do this. It's going to crop up. And what I don't want to do, and look, we're almost done with the boring part. I told you. I warned you. What I never want you to do is when you sit down to draft to worry about this. Okay? All that's going to do is get you stuck. Right? Draft how you draft. But when you edit, when you go back and you think about, how can I make this better? I promise you, this is one of the ways that can happen. If you look for places, usually one of the best ways to find it is if you have too many verbs. Does anybody not know what a verb is? I'm going to believe you. If you have more, really, a lot of times you don't even need two verbs together. That just means you need one of those you get to pick. But if you have two or definitely three, chances are very good you got a long stretch of language that's just not doing much. We're underscoring a thing that someone needs to realize about it just chugs. It doesn't do anything. Cut all of it. Pick one verb. You'll streamline the sentence. That has been the writing lesson for today. Great. All right. What that also did, it trimmed a bit just throughout, okay? So that helps us see what we actually have. The other drawback of all that language, I don't like it, but I understand on some level you don't care much about that. It tricks you guys. It makes you think you have more than you actually have, right? If you cut the fat, you see what you have left. That's what is really in your paper. We'll start from the top. As people get older, only about 20% of adults play sports that are 50 years or older. All right. So I mentioned this offhand earlier. We say older and older. I'm not in love with that. There's a super easy fix. Does anybody know how we might change the first half of that sentence? Get rid of one of those olders?
Drop the phrase like people get older, say people age.
You could. Or, I mean, look, we end up talking about people that are 50 years or older. That tells me we're talking about old people. Yeah? Only about 20% of adults play sports that are 50 years or older. That's still kind of awkward, but again, we've trimmed some fat. That's what we wanted to say. Whether that is due to their physical ability or freedom of time, I guess the end of that would be, I don't know, is kind of what they're saying. I don't know if that's even necessary. This is a hook. Just give us the stat. That's fine. Because immediately after that, in the poem, Old Men Playing Basketball, B.H. Fairchild discusses the aspects of life that change as you grow older. That kind of ties into our hook, at least a little bit, right? Immediately, though, my question is, what aspects? If you're going to say something like that, you got to tell me. You have to. You're kind of signing a contract with your reader that immediately after that, you're like, I'm going to find out what these aspects are. As this man watches from the stands, he sees the old men. All right, I got an easy fix to this too. What do we call this man? We had a word for him. Good. Speaker sees the old men struggling to play basketball. That is a complex. It does not look as smooth and painless as it once was. His own inner thoughts. This is an asshole statement, and I do apologize. Inner thoughts. Problem with that. Where do your thoughts live? In you. And they're his own thoughts. His thoughts start to come to mind. Where do your thoughts reside? Okay. How about this? He wonders about the sexual characteristics of their lives and if that still has a spark or not. Again, isn't that what we actually wanted to say? What you saw, again, was their brain going, I know what, but I don't know how to say it, right? It's one of those. It happens to you all the time. It happens to you in conversation, and we forgive each other because we're not monsters, right? But in writing, it's there, and you got to train yourselves to see it so you can weed it out. That's the difference. If you try to do that in conversation, no one will want to talk to you. Like, wait a minute, this guy sucks. We're out of here, right? Okay. Now look, we've already trimmed it. I told you before, I was worried the summary was a little long. I could live with this. I think it might still be a bit long. Yeah. But hey, it's fine. What we still have not done, though, is talk much about these aspects. I guess I could forgive it for maybe 2 sentences, but we damn sure better be talking about them here. This is where you guys come in. And if you need to reread it, now that we've moved stuff around, trimmed things, you can. It's shorter. Read it real quick, we'll talk about it. Question. What is a roadmap meant to accomplish? And to the best of your ability, do you think we're doing that here? It's not going to be 100%. This is a rough draft. We're not saying that, but like, are we on to anything? Is there anything here we can use? And if so, how do we try to make it better? What do you guys think?
I think that a roadmap is supposed to lay out the groundwork for what you're going to say in the poem. And I believe that we're having, not in the wrong, in the writing, and I believe that we have some points like how the person who wrote this started talking about the responsibilities, heightened abilities dwindle as you grow up.
Okay.
They start to lay down something that they might talk about in the future body paragraph.
I agree. The one thing I would add to your, this is pretty well put. The one thing I would add is those things that you're saying need to be arguments, right? Ideas that require proof. And I think we're kind of doing that. Okay? We'll take it sentence by sentence. Throughout the poem, the author links the concepts of aging and abilities. Your responsibilities heighten and abilities dwindle as you grow up. I guess the first question would be, do you feel like the poem does that? Just like a simple yes or no. What do you think?
Yes.
I think so, kind of. I don't know if this particular poem, I'm trying to play devil's advocate a little bit. I don't know if he goes much into like responsibilities as you age. He does that in other poems that we looked at. I don't know if Old Man Playing Basketball. It seems like, to my mind, it seems mostly what he does is like getting old sucks because for reasons that we talked about. And then he keeps reminiscing on their youth and how magical that must have been, and you know what I mean? So I would quibble with the language a little bit. But I would agree that the ability is dwindling. I would very much agree with that. The poem is very much about that. Okay. Is that an argument, do you think? No one is sure. I'll ask it this way. Is that an argument that requires proving that your abilities kind of wane as you age? Mixed results. Why'd you say yes? Sure, but I'm trying to think how to put this. Even when Tom Brady is 70, he will retire at some point. Like, he will be incapable. Do you know what I mean? He will poop himself. Like, that'll happen if he gets old enough. Hey, that happens. I'm not pumped about it either. But it's one of those just like truths of life. You know what I mean? I honestly think, to dive into your head a little bit, which I'm not able to do, what's likelier, I think, is you guys are so young, it doesn't even, like when we brought it up in class, some of you were like, no, because that's not even part of your life. You know, you can do whatever you want. You could slay Thor if you wanted to. You guys are just full of everything right now, you know? But it does wane. It does. My back, man. Holy God. That's why I do this. I move around because my back, it's not good. What's it from? Just getting older. It's a bummer. It's coming. So the point is, I worry this is a little bit banal right now, right? There's two things you can do about that. Number one, you cut it, which sucks. That's stuff we wrote. I don't like doing that. Sometimes you have to. But you can try another thing first. The other thing is, we got to get more specific to the poem, all right? What I mean by that is, the reason this is banal, I'll put it off by itself for a second. The reason that sentence is banal is you know that, or at least you've entertained that idea before you ever got to this poem. So you didn't need to read this poem to figure that out. You see what I'm saying? What we got to do, if we're going to talk about this somehow, is tie it to the poem a little more specifically. Like take this idea, and what does the poem do with it? How does the speaker think about it? Why is he thinking about it? Anything like that. Okay? So let's start there. Why does the speaker care about this? Because on some level, he brings it to our attention, right? He's speaking the poem to us. Why does he point out this thing that, like, if you stop for a couple seconds, you'd be like, yeah, I mean, I get it. You know. Why? Yeah.
It's something he's worried about.
We talked about that. All right, let me get, throughout the poem, the author, Really? All right. I would agree with that. But again, to this point, that's still mostly a summary, right? That's one of those things, if you said it to somebody who'd read the poem, they'd be hard pressed to disagree with you, right? Did your hand up, Ron? Go ahead.
Something that we said in class is lost of masculinity or something like that, like going on with that.
I remember that. Why? How might we entertain that notion that, like, basically what you're bringing up is a good question. Why? Why is he worried about this? There's multiple possibilities.
You seen the house slippers he was wearing?
What happened?
You seen like the house slippers he was wearing?
It was interesting that he focused on the dude's army fatigues and then house shoes, right? That's kind of the point. That's a little more nitty gritty. That's something we'll get more into in the body of the paper. But that clearly, probably, exposes a little more of like, certain things the speaker focuses on tells you about his priorities, right? Like about what matters to him. And the army fatigue says something, but then house shoes says something else about what matters to him, right? So I think that helps along kind of what you brought up. I mean, all I'm asking is there a way to speak to that idea, this idea that masculine stereotypes or expectations or whatever somehow ties in with this concern that the speaker has?
Can you repeat that, please?
First thing, read the sentence. You all keep looking at it. Read it. Got it? It's short. All right, don't worry about it. Don't look at it anymore. Why is the speaker, well, because if you guys will just look at it and nothing will happen. Why is the speaker worried about this? He watches these old men struggle and he's like, I bet they don't get down anymore. And we somehow said that anxiety is linked to his own masculinity, his own sense of his masculinity, perhaps. Why might that be? Real talk. What we're doing right now, this is all coming from your heads. That's how you know it's an argument. That's why it's difficult. Because up till now, most of your writing careers has been regurgitate this information. You read this, you memorized it, barf it down on this page, good, here's your 100 or whatever. That's not what an argument is. An argument comes from here, right? What's the physical abilities or the lack thereof? Sexual abilities or the lack thereof? Got to do with the masculinity of these old men playing basketball. I mean, that is the title after all. That must matter. Are they lesser as men?
From the speaker's eyes, I guess.
Do I know?
I guess from the speaker's eyes, yeah.
We always have to be very careful. We all know, just to be clear, we all know you didn't write the poem. It's okay. I think so. Given, again, what he focuses on, fixates on, you could say. At the very least, it's very important. And when we have those constellation of things, physicality, sexuality, house shoes, those all kind of fall under one umbrella. And yeah, it seems like this speaker, you could argue, now it's an argument, He's not just worried about the loss of abilities that come with aging. Where's about those and that's an argument. You got to prove that. You got to explain that. Okay? Cool. Next sentence. The author points out that as you get older, let's help ourselves out. You can also probably leave the author out most of the time. All right. As you get older, you still want the same things, whether that is sex or the ability to be active. Your physical strength is a key factor. Okay? We're going to do a different kind of pop quiz this time. There's a single aspect in this sentence that we could absolutely dig more into. To be clear, this is not an argument right now. But there's something here that tells me this student is headed in a good direction. What do you think we could dig more into in this statement? Which is to say, a lot of it we could cut away.
Is it the strength aspect?
I kind of feel like we say that up here. Somebody said something else.
As you get older, you still want the same things.
That's interesting. Why? Let's stop here for just a second and talk about this. Why is that worth pointing out? Because I think it can be. As you get older, you want the same things. Why is that a worthwhile statement, do you think? For instance, ballparking it, you guys are right now all around like 18 or so, give or take. Are you really, truly that different from when you were like 12?
Yes.
Some of you in some, but I'm talking about like fundamentally. I'm talking about like I don't mean you can smoke and vote and like, yeah, fuck, you're different. You can buy a gun, that's pretty different. No, I mean like the way you move through the world, the way you judge people when they walk past you. God, I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Some of you might be. I don't know that a lot of you are. And I guess a better example, and you haven't lived this yet, I'm pretty much exactly who I was when I was like 23 or something. That was a long time ago. My point is, to tie it back to this, I do think in a lot of ways, you grow up, you mature for sure. A lot of that is just you get better at dealing with the world's shit, okay? That's all that means. That's what maturity is. I didn't get a thing I liked. It's like, exactly, that's your life now. But you still want a lot of the same stuff, Before I left to come up here, my wife had made peanut butter cookies, and I was like, sorry, I'm in my 30s, I'm gonna have some cookies. I still want it, Just now nobody's gonna be like, you can't. I was like, I can.
I think you're expected to change.
Exactly.
And it's like your wants are expected to change along with
Good.
you.
Well, especially when you're like 70 plus. Look, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on it, but we gotta spend a little bit. You guys were deeply unhappy when I made you recognize the fact that this poem is not just about old men playing basketball. Why? We don't gotta talk a lot of it, but like, why were you unhappy about that?
You don't want to think about old men getting stoned.
Apart from the obvious. I don't want to think about anybody getting down. It's their business. Leave them to it, right? Apart from that.
Everyone wants to be old.
I think so, and that as well, for sure. What'd you say?
We want things to be simple.
Yeah, well, you guys might tie together then a little bit. How do we envision old folks and what they do or don't do? What's grandma doing, right?
I agree.
Watching The Price is Right.
Watching The Price is Right, and then just Yoda fading into the chair, right? Like, that's the end of it. Yeah. Don't want to. Isn't it on some level, those expectations that we have of every old person, isn't that like kind of cutting out a big chunk of their humanity?
Yeah.
No, you're just a robot that makes me things when I visit and smells like cheese and watches Price is Right. Like, it's like, that's what you do. I'm not here living. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a worthwhile say. It challenges a lot of preconceived notions we have about a pretty sizable chunk of the population. Right? Yeah. Okay. So all that is to say, I think, look, some of this might come back, but I do think some of this ties into what we said in the previous sentence, so I'm just going to cut it for right now, right? As you get older, you want the same things. Let's expound upon that just a bit. Thanks, Google. That means what? It's two things.
Simplicity.
No. What do these old people want, according to the speaker? What was the other thing?
I was gonna say to play basketball, according to this.
Well, both of those things. Both of those things. So, let's just talk about that. Let's go ahead and solve them instead of like spending more time saying old people sex. Why do these old men play basketball? We didn't talk about that when we talked about pole. We didn't have time.
It reminds them of when they were young.
Maybe. We're going to be in maybe land a little bit because we never get into their heads, right? But we can be a little bit simpler. Think about this. Think about the way the speaker describes the game. It's for like almost 3 full stanzas. It's brutal. Some of that could be the speaker, kind of putting his own, maybe. But it's 3 full stanzas, and I take him at his word. I kind of feel like it's accurate. If old men were playing basketball, it would probably be awful. It'd be borderline torture, perhaps. So, why? Why are they doing that to themselves?
They still want to be active.
Yeah. Well, again, I think we're getting to this now, right? And that kind of ties in because when you're young, you're more active.
Is it one of those like makes you feel alive kind of things?
Well, which is to suggest, I suppose, if they don't play basketball, they might as well be dead.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe. So what, again, like to be more active, to be more alive, to remind them of when they were young. Young what? Men, in this case. It is, the title of the poem is Old Men Playing Basketball. Yeah, so capable as they sort of prove to themselves, right? Like this is kind of the language we're dealing with now. As you get older, you still want the same things. In this poem, that means, fuck, come on. Everything's weird. Hold on, I'll just move it. All right. That means, I had fun at the end of the sentence. Okay. What we got to do now, we got to try to tie those together. Our first sentence, the speaker's worried about aging, what it means for him and his masculinity, right? We talked a lot about that. Second sentence, we actually kind of go to the old men. We didn't talk about that in class, but that's fair game here too. We sort of turn the lens on them and say, why are they playing basketball even? Well, one argument, they want to prove to themselves, right? So much of what the speaker's deal is how he's going to look to others. But there's a part of how you look to yourself, right? That's part of this question too. And these old men are like, fuck, I still have to go. I don't know how old men would feel, probably not like that. But can we tie these two ideas together? What is and I've said this already, sort of big umbrella that unites these two ideas, do you think? I was worried about that. All right, let's do one more sentence before we do that then. Because to be fair, we only have 2 sentences and we're probably gonna have at least 3 body paragraphs. So let's entertain a possibility of another paragraph. What would we talk about? Our first piece of evidence for this first paragraph, Do they still make love to their wives? That'd be a pretty easy line to talk about a speaker, right? Because that's super out of left field. Okay. Second paragraph. 2 or 3 lines from those first 2 stanzas. Any of them. Old people hurting themselves. Hurting themselves. They could be watching The Price is Right. Right? They're doing this to themselves. So why? Okay. Give me another line that might tie into any of that at all, you think? We're talking about masculinity and feeling young and feeling capable in several different ways, right?
When they were like at the drive-in.
I think so.
Simplicity of life.
What'd you say?
Simplicity of life.
What does that even mean?
They don't work kids or shit like that.
That might be, I'll say this, because you always have to deal with whatever the poem gives you. So we don't talk about mortgage, we don't talk about kids, to be fair. It is simpler, but that's because we could boil it down to a very simple thing. What is, in this case, it's according to the speaker, because this is firmly in his mind, right? This is a hypothetical, he just weaves from nothing. What is it to be a young man, according to the speaker? If you go back and think about the stanza we're talking about, they're at the drive-in, her raven hair flames in the shuddering light of the outdoor movie, and then he drives, gliding toward the net. I've read this poem a lot. What is that stanza? Yeah, they're at a movie. Don't ask them about the plot, right? Like that. That's what it. And it's, to your point, that's kind of all it is. That's all it is. And yeah, because you don't have you don't have this other stuff, but like, well, I don't want to force feed you my argument, but let's, so, this poem means you're going through this others, capable of both on and off court antics. Right? To kind of tie it back to our earlier conversation about ability, right? There are different kinds of ability. We've mostly been concerned with performance because they're not, they're not performing on the court, therefore the speaker wonders if you get it. But there's that too. She's the girl. She has hair. It's black. It's raven. No other defining characteristics. I hate to put it this way. You could argue in his fantasy, she's kind of function only.
Like, they're for the taking, like on the hunt kind of deal.
There for the fucking. To be as blunt as we can, right? Well, and again, we're in his head, right? This is where you're most honest with yourself, if you're the speaker. I think we could easily argue this. He's envisioning when they were young men. This is how he defines what it is to be a young man. This is what he's worried he's losing as he ages. This is it. That brings us, at the very least, to a possibility for a really cool thesis. That will be difficult. I'm only going to take a couple minutes. We'll see if we can do something. Don't freak out. All right. As of now, what do we have in our thesis? All right, basically, men are concerned with physical capabilities. Let's do this. This is not going to be a sentence when I'm done with it, but you guys will get bogged down in some of this language, so I just want to. Man's concerns, physical capabilities, how that can affect his lifestyle. Okay. B.H. Fairchild's a dude. I mean, it's not a big deal, but his name is Bertram. Anyway, B.H., right? Good call. He does this in the poem by relating the game of basketball to age, freedom, and labor. Oh, 3 prongs, or whatever your teachers called it. We did talk about age. We talked about that. I guess freedom comes in, sort of. I think we could be more specific. Freedom to do what? What? Fuck, yeah. I mean, that's what they're talking about. This is not sex. Some of you said making love. That's not what this is. Words matter. That's not what he's talking about. It's not. Some of you are upset I said that word. That's the accurate word. Anyway. And labor. There's that line in there about labor. So, I mean, I don't know. My point here is they may, I would assume, talk about some of this in their paper. It did not show up in their roadmap. So we don't know. So one thing they might do, they might keep some of what we came up with, that's fine. Some of this may change entirely because apparently they got other stuff going on, right, that we didn't even recognize. That should be a signal too. Remember, whatever you talk about in your thesis, ideally you're going to talk about it in your paper. But you also need to talk about it in your roadmap. It's got to show up here, okay? But I don't know what they did with that stuff. I don't. So I'm going to delete it just because we don't know. We got to work with what we have. All right. So men's physical capabilities, how that affects lifestyle, relating the game of basketball to, that's kind of all we talked about. This to me is a great working thesis. Just like we talked about last time, this says to me what the student wants to talk about, but they just haven't quite sorted out how they want to go about that, how they want to say it, right? Because that is the hard part. We're going to do, again, just for a minute, get excited. Read over the roadmap here. Go ahead and read it. What big idea do we keep coming back to? Like theme. What big theme or concern do we keep coming back to here? And how that's tied to what? Well, and how both of those things are tied to what? There's something that's like a... Thank you. Okay. So that tells me our thesis has got to say something about how that works. Okay? And again, there's actually multiple possible answers here. That's another indicator of a good argument. That tells you you're in a good place. The reason an argument requires proof is because usually there are other possible arguments. Okay? So you got to fight against those with your proof, with your analysis, your explanation, right? What are some things, again, because there's a couple, what are some things we're kind of saying about masculinity and how it works here, you think? Either for the speaker, the old men, all of the above, like what do you...
Is it kind of like how we talked about in class the other day, eventually you just kind of age out of masculinity?
That could be part of it. I mean, that's kind of what we're saying in the first sentence, but we could bring that idea back and try to use it as part of a larger idea.
So like,
Google's not gonna. All right. The speaker, what? Dealing with this reality, right? Because we said it's a concern, it's an anxiety, so that would seem to suggest he knows this is a thing that's going to happen.
inevitability.
Yeah, I mean, we got that. Somebody, you say something? Somebody say something.
Like projects on these old men.
We could try that. What about that? What might that tell us again about masculinity and how it works? I guess we're focused on the speaker here. So what's it doing to him? What's it doing to his mindset, his perspective, his worldview? Do you know what I mean? Like we have a set of expectations, a set of stereotypes, and they seem to be working on this guy in a certain way, right? I don't know. Questions what? What's masculinity doing to this guy? And again, when we say that, we've said it like 17 times, we're talking about that list of expectations, right? The stereotypes that are in place that no one really ever broke down for you, but the culture you're in has taught you, right? Like when my son got off the bench at our last basketball game to go warm up, he did this. And I'm cool with it, but like 5% of me, the way I was raised, went, oh, dude, that's not, somebody's gonna, that's not okay. You know? I don't give a shit, but you know, you're programmed the way you're programmed, and you can only do so much. That's what we're talking about. Like these things are in the speaker's head, and they shape his thoughts. They shape the way he sees the world. They shape the way he sees himself, right? In what way, though? That's what we're trying to figure out. We got 15 minutes. You guys are packing it. Blowing my mind. He's dealing with the reality of his waning masculinity. He's faced it. He sees these old men. He goes, that's my future. Damn it. So what? Why is he so worried about it? Why does it matter?
Because as you get older, your physical ability decreases, and if you can't physically perform, how are you gonna have sex?
Well, that's yeah. But why does he care about that? So what? Question always is so what? Yes.
Is it because like he can't meet what his picture like idea of masculinity is?
Sure, but why does he care? Why does that matter?
Because he
Wants to be a man.
Sure, but you get past stuff. Why is it such a big deal to him? What do you say over there?
That he's gonna age, so it's inevitable.
Yeah, but why does he care? Like we know it's inevitable. I'm asking, why does that bother him? Yeah, but that's banal, right? Nobody wants to get older. Once you hit 21 or what, nobody wants to get older.
Fragile masculinity?
Huh?
Maybe fragile masculinity?
No, that's one of those BuzzFeed articles that, no, get that shit out of here. I mean, that can be part of it, but I do worry in this class, sometimes you guys will hit me with like, it's like, oh, I get it, yeah, toxic masculinity. No. Don't go down that road right yet. Don't do it yet, okay? You guys are dancing around something. You don't realize it, but like you're actually kind of almost doing something that's interesting. You could argue, all right, I'll give it to you this way. You could, and you should not, but you could argue that he doesn't want to get old, right? You could say that. Now, pop quiz real quick. Why would you not say that?
Because it's the opposite.
It's banal. Nobody wants to get old. If you do, you're lying to yourself. Nobody does. Okay. The trick then is to get more specific, just like we did at the top of this lesson, right? More specific to the poem. It's not just that he doesn't want to get old. He doesn't want to what? Nah, you're too specific. What doesn't he want to be? What's the title of the poem?
Old man.
Thank you. He doesn't want to be an old man. He wants to be a man, not an old man. It's different. It's different, clearly, for the speaker. It's very different. his disdain that's still not an argument yet. What's he not worried about when it comes to getting old? According to what we're arguing about this poem. There's a super available thing we haven't really talked about. Health? No. I mean, kind of. What happens when you're no longer healthy? You die. Most of us don't want to get old, I would imagine, because at some point, you die. And that sucks. He didn't really talk about that. Ever. The last line, like, maybe, but not really. It's all about sex. It all is. Well, that allows us to argue, again, about his list of priorities. Number 1 on that list, as you guys have pointed out, is sex. Number 2 is probably physical ability. Maybe like number 7 is just being alive. Well then, you've heard this phrase before, a fate worse than death. What's worse than death to this guy?
Not having sex.
Yeah. That's interesting. All I said, I know the lionization, his celebration, he thinks this shit is cool, okay, of masculine ideals. His lionization of masculine ideals. Something like that. And look, again, I'm not super in love with the end of this. That was my way of just capping it off because basically we're out of time and I've tortured you guys as much as I can. What I would say though, this is much more like what we're trying to do, okay? And look, all we did, I'll space it out again so we can see it a little better. I think it's here, yeah. That roadmap, first of all, could be a little longer still. Not least of which because the thesis they had in place had a couple other ideas in there that they weren't in their roadmap and so they couldn't show up in ours, right? So there's maybe more going on. But with what we had, we still had plenty to talk about. We took the obvious thing because we already said it. He's dealing with this, so he doesn't like it, cool. And we forced ourselves with the rest of it to try to connect that to something larger. The question you're always trying to answer in any of these papers, what does this text say about us as a people, a society, or a culture? And that's a big question. That's a big question. But that more often than not necessitates like an upper order thought process, right? So you take this specific that we did here, that we could do more of, and you try to zoom out a little bit. What connects all this stuff? What bigger idea, theme, concern, whatever, unites the discussion we're trying to have? One available option is masculinity, because it kind of keeps coming up, right? We talk about that, and we talk about the very present sort of ideals that we all navigate. Whether you agree with them, disagree with them, think that they're bullshit, it doesn't matter, they are there. And you live in them, they're surrounding us, even now. Just like this guy. So, the ideas that have shaped his perspective, that's what we end up trying our best to talk about in the thesis. That's why the poem matters. That's basically what you're doing. You're arguing, what does any of this have to do with any of us? Right? It's this. He'd rather be dead than not be able to have sex. That's a wild thought that I don't know that some people would disagree with. That's an argument. Great. Questions? Any at all? About anything we did? Okay. Will you get the lights for us, please? I appreciate it. We have a couple minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Perhaps not about what we did today. A different poem? I don't know, anything. Sure.
So whenever you're writing your essay, how do you like avoid the banal stuff? 'Cause, like I'm writing mine on little boy,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I'm just kind of hitting the same thing of like, oh, like dynamic of father and son, ideas of choice and stuff like that. Like am I hitting like any major?
Well, everybody has a different, I guess, barometer for banal statements. And it's one of those things, I mean, unfortunately, in some ways, you want to kind of build that muscle through trial and error, right? Some of the more banal statements, I think all of you can find, right? The important thing is you want to try to not glaze over when you're looking at your own work. That can happen. But in that poem, like two of the banal statements I always get. Number one, father figures are important. And I'm like, great. And the dad has PTSD. And I'm like, God. Two things about those. Father figures are important. Whether it's a man or a horse, I don't know. They're important, right? You just need parents. It's good to have them. How does that factor into the poem? Just like we did here, talking about old men and struggling and physical, like we got more specific. If you get more specific, oftentimes that banal argument is really just an indication that you need to dig further, right? Sometimes you just need to throw it out, but most of the time, it's actually showing you, well, I am interested in the poem, I just haven't been nearly detailed enough.
Because I feel like I'm already seeing things that are like super obvious, and like I'm not hitting the next like.
Can you think of one?
Huh?
Can you think of one off the top of your head that bugs you?
Just the whole like idea of choice, like oh his dad didn't have a choice to like drop the bomb on Japan and stuff like that.
I mean, he didn't. Was your hand up?
Yeah, but wait.
Oh, okay, I just want to make sure. He didn't, but again, the question would be, so what? Like, why do we care he didn't have a choice in that? If you stick with just that one thing, I mean, you could do work with it, I suppose. Like, what does that tell us? Well, it is a question in the poem because the boy, you could argue, implies he thinks his dad did. You know, when you're small, your parents are superheroes. They are the gatekeepers to the entire world. They know everything. They control everything. They tell you when to go to bed. That's power, you know? And then as you get older, as the speaker does, he realizes, oh, no, my dad didn't control anything. So there's this sort of facade of youth going on when the boy is small. He thinks his dad in this case, is much more capable than he really was. Which is to say, again, that's kind of got us to our end statement when we talked about it in class, that a big part of adulthood maturity is just understanding how small you are, how insignificant, unpowered you are, you know? But see, all I did there was I took an idea that you're worried about and you get more specific. You can connect it to other elements of the poem, or you can think about like another line that's related to it, and you try to talk about them in tandem. It depends. Did that sort of answer your question? Mm-hmm. Okay. And when in doubt, you guys can always send me stuff too. You know, write something up like, "Hey, here's a paragraph," and you send it to me. We talk more about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. What's your question, son?
Yeah, kind of answered my question. That's why I was letting it.
Okay.
That's my questions about banal statements.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out.
And again, just like I said with unnecessary language, what I would not want you to do is stifle your own drafting process. So like, honestly, especially at the stage you guys are at right now, write whatever you're gonna write. Legit, get it out. Half the time, you kind of gotta write through a bunch of shit before you get to something good. That happens to me. That happens to everybody. You're not in charge of your own brain, you're just not. But write that stuff, and what I'm trying to explain to you guys is, if you actually dig into working over what you have on the page, recognizing when it's banal, recognizing when language is, you know, all that stuff, trim that away, then you get to some of the good stuff, you can dig more into it, you can develop it. Because nobody's first draft is good, usually. Very rarely. Usually that's when it gets good, is working over your draft, okay? But yeah, write all the banal statements, but then just try to recognize them, if that makes sense. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you do a summary of beauty? Because I was reading it yesterday and I was like,
I'm glad you brought that up. That'll actually bring me to my, I don't know if I can sum it up in the next 3 minutes. I made a video, because I knew we wouldn't be able to talk about it today. I made a video that I think, and this won't make you maybe terribly happy, I think it's like 20 or so minutes long. I'm going to post it today. You don't have to watch it, but especially if you're thinking about writing about that poem, I think it'd be a good thing to watch. I'm gonna walk through like kind of the whole poem. If I could sum it up real quick, the reason I assign it, and we almost never get to talk about it, because we need to do this at this stage. I told you before that all these poems are like about the same kinds of people from the same kind of part of the world and time. And, you know, beauty is all about like where these people are from, and who they are, and how they grew up. So even if you write about one of the other poems, I think just reading beauty can help kind of fill in that picture a little bit of the kind of people we're talking about. One of my favorite sections of the poem, though, and then I'll let you guys go. You guys always miss this. It's the last section. I think there's 4. And at the very beginning of the 4th section, it said these men were fullbacks and guards, blah blah blah. He's talking about football positions. If anybody follows football, fullbacks, guards, those are the guys that don't get any airtime. Those are the guys that do all the hard work while a running back gets a touchdown, you know, or something. He gets all the accolades. Oh, I can't believe that guy. So like, did you see the hole he ran through? Like, no one cares. No one cares about the people on the line in the mud. And he's saying that's who these people are. And of course, that's a metaphor for who they are in life. But that details like that, I think, are really big in that poem. And as always, again, especially because I'm giving it short shrift today, if you want to talk about that poem, I would love to talk to you about it in whatever way you'd like to do that. But I'm also going to post a video today where I talk at you about it, and that may help as well. Is that good enough for now?
yeah.
You didn't sound thrilled, but that's okay. All right, anything else? Let me see. Oh, rough draft, due to turnitin.com. If you have not signed up for that yet, you should do that. I sent you an email, Turnitin info. It's got a class ID and a password. You got to go to turnitin.com to make that happen. That's all I got. Thank you. I'll see you next week.